Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her back against the cold metal wall of the research station's corridor, listening to the sounds of chaos echoing from the main lab. The attack had come without warning. One moment she had been analyzing mineral samples from the newly discovered planet Zarion 7, and the next, the station's alarms were screaming as unknown ships descended from orbit. "All personnel to emergency evacuation pods," the automated voice repeated over the intercom. But Sarah knew the pods were already gone. She had seen the last one launch through the observation window moments ago, carrying the final group of researchers to safety. She had stayed behind, foolishly trying to save her research data. Now she was trapped. The sound of energy weapons grew closer. Through the reinforced windows, Sarah could see the attackers moving through the station's outer sections. They were Krillians, a warrior species known for their brutality and their hatred of human expansion into their territory. The research station on Zarion 7 was supposed to be a peaceful scientific outpost, but apparently the Krillians saw it as an invasion. Sarah clutched her medical bag tighter. As the station's xenobiologist and medic, she had refused to leave without ensuring all the research animals were safe. Most had been evacuated with the main group, but she knew there were still a few specimens in the lower levels that needed care. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows as she made her way through the empty corridors. Her footsteps echoed loudly in the silence, making her wince. Every sound seemed amplified in the deserted station. She reached the elevator shaft, but the power was out. The emergency ladders would have to do. Sarah began the long climb down to sub-level 3, where the xenobiology lab was located. Her muscles ached, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the station's cooling systems. As she descended, Sarah heard something that made her freeze. It was a sound unlike anything she had ever heard before. A low, rumbling moan that seemed to vibrate through the metal walls. It came from somewhere below her, in the direction she was heading. Fear and curiosity warred in her mind. The logical part of her screamed to turn around, to find another way off the station. But the scientist in her, the part that had dedicated her life to understanding alien life forms, urged her forward. The sound came again, weaker this time, and Sarah realized it sounded like pain. Something was hurt down there. She reached sub-level 3 and carefully opened the access door. The corridor beyond was in ruins. Blast marks scarred the walls, and debris littered the floor. The Krillian attackers had been here, but they seemed to have moved on. Sarah activated her handheld light and stepped into the damaged hallway. The xenobiology lab was at the far end, but the moaning sound was coming from a side corridor she had never explored before. According to the station schematics, that area was supposed to be empty storage. As she approached the source of the sound, Sarah's light illuminated something that made her gasp. Lying in a pool of dark liquid that could only be blood was a creature unlike anything in the station's files. It was massive, easily 12 feet long, with a body that seemed to be a fusion of reptile and something far more elegant. Its scales shimmed with an iridescent quality, shifting from deep purple to midnight blue in her light. 4 legs ended in clawed feet, but the claws seemed designed for precision rather than just destruction. Most striking of all were the wings. Partially folded against its back, they were translucent with veins of silver running through them like living artwork. A dragon. There was no other word for it. But dragons were supposed to be mythical creatures from human folklore, not real aliens living on distant planets. The creature's eyes opened as her light fell on it. They were intelligent eyes, filled with pain, but also wariness. Golden irises focused on her with surprising clarity. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, caught between scientific fascination and pure terror. The creature was clearly injured. She could see burns along its side and what looked like a deep gash in one wing, but it was also clearly predator, built for hunting and killing. The dragon tried to lift its head, and Sarah saw the effort it cost. A weak sound escaped its throat, not quite a roar, more like a whimper. That sound broke through her fear. This was a hurt animal, regardless of its species or size. Sarah had sworn an oath to help all living creatures, and she had never broken that oath yet. Moving slowly and keeping her movements visible, Sarah approached the injured dragon. She kept her voice soft and calm, the way she would with any frightened animal. "Easy there, big guy," she said quietly. "I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a doctor. Well, sort of. I can help." The dragon watched her approach with those golden eyes. Its breathing was labored, and Sarah could see that its injuries were severe. Burns covered much of its right side, and the wing wound was bleeding steadily. She knelt beside the massive head, close enough that she could feel the creature's warm breath on her face. Up close, she could see more details. The scales weren't just beautiful. They seemed to have a function, creating natural armor while remaining flexible. The head was noble, almost regal, with horns that curved back elegantly. "You're magnificent," Sarah whispered, reaching into her medical bag. She had supplies meant for human injuries, but the basics of trauma care were universal. Stop the bleeding, prevent infection, manage pain. The dragon didn't move as she examined its wounds. Either it was too weak to resist, or it somehow understood she was trying to help. The burns were the most serious immediate threat. They covered nearly a third of the creature's body and looked like they had come from energy weapons, the same type the Krillians used. Sarah felt a surge of anger at the senseless cruelty. This creature had probably been hiding in the storage area, trying to avoid the conflict, and had been attacked anyway. She began cleaning the wounds with antiseptic solution, working as gently as possible. The dragon flinched at first, but then seemed to relax, as it realized she wasn't causing more pain. "I don't know if human medicine will work on you," Sarah said as she worked, finding that talking helped calm both of them. "But you're carbon-based like us, and your blood chemistry seems similar from what I can see. At the very least, I can clean these wounds and try to stop the bleeding." The wing wound was tricky. Sarah had never dealt with wing anatomy before, but she could see the damage was extensive. Several of the delicate support structures were torn, and the translucent membrane was punctured in multiple places. As she worked on the wing, the dragon made a sound, not of pain, but almost like a sigh of relief. It was working. Her treatment was actually helping. Sarah spent what felt like hours tending to the creature's injuries. She used most of her medical supplies, creating bandages and splints from whatever materials she could find in the damaged station. The dragon remained still throughout, occasionally making soft sounds that Sarah began to interpret as appreciation. When she finally finished, both of them were exhausted. Sarah sat back on her heels, surveying her work. The dragon's breathing had improved, and the bleeding had stopped. It wasn't perfect medical care, but it might be enough to save the creature's life. The dragon turned its great head toward her, and those golden eyes fixed on her face. For a moment, Sarah felt as though she was being measured, evaluated by an intelligence far older and wiser than her own. Then the dragon did something that took her breath away. It lowered its massive head and gently touched her hand with its snout. The gesture was unmistakably grateful, even tender. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. In the middle of this chaos, this violence, she had found something beautiful. She had helped a creature that could easily have killed her, and in return it had shown her trust and gratitude. "You're welcome," she whispered, gently stroking the dragon's snout. The scales felt warm and smooth under her fingers. A distant explosion reminded her that they were still in danger. The Krillians might return, and even if they didn't, the station was badly damaged. Life support might fail at any moment. Sarah stood up, her legs shaky from kneeling for so long. "I have to go," she told the dragon. "I need to find a way off this station, but I'll try to come back for you, I promise." The dragon watched her with those intelligent eyes as she gathered her things. As she reached the doorway, she turned back for one last look. The magnificent creature was struggling to its feet. Sarah started to rush back, worried it was injuring itself further, but the dragon's movements were deliberate, careful. It was weak, but determined. "Stay down," Sarah called. "You need to rest." But the dragon ignored her advice. With great effort, it folded its injured wings against its back and took a tentative step forward. Then another. Sarah realized with amazement that it was trying to follow her. "No, you can't," she said, torn between concern for the creature's health and wonder at its determination. "You're too injured to move." The dragon paused and looked at her directly. Then it made a sound, not a moan of pain or a cry of distress, but something almost like speech. A complex pattern of tones that seemed to carry meaning. Sarah stared at the creature in shock. Was it trying to communicate with her? Did it understand what she was saying? Before she could process this revelation fully, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the corridor. Heavy boots, moving with military precision. The Krillians were returning. Sarah's heart raced as she realized they were trapped. The dragon couldn't move fast enough to escape, and she couldn't abandon it after everything they had been through together. The footsteps grew closer. Sarah could hear voices now, speaking in the harsh, guttural language of the Krillian military. They were conducting a systematic search of the station, and they would reach this section soon. She looked at the dragon, seeing her own fear reflected in those golden eyes. The creature understood the danger as well as she did. Then, something extraordinary happened. Despite its injuries, despite the pain it must have been feeling, the dragon moved to position itself between Sarah and the approaching threat. Its wings spread slightly, and its head lowered in a protective stance. It was trying to guard her. "No," Sarah whispered, placing her hand on the dragon's snout. "You can't fight in your condition. You'll be killed." But the dragon's eyes held a determination that reminded Sarah why she had fallen in love with studying alien life in the first place. Here was a creature that embodied nobility, courage, and gratitude in a way that transcended species barriers. The footsteps stopped just outside the doorway. Sarah held her breath, pressing herself against the dragon's warm side. The creature remained perfectly still, but she could feel the tension in its muscles, ready to strike if necessary. A Krillian voice barked something in their language, and the footsteps moved on. Apparently, they hadn't detected anything unusual in the damaged corridor. Sarah and the dragon remained frozen for several more minutes until the sounds faded completely. Only then did they both allow themselves to breathe normally. "Thank you," Sarah whispered against the dragon's scales. "You were protecting me." The dragon made that complex sound again, and this time Sarah was certain it was trying to communicate. She might not understand the language, but the intent was clear. They had formed a bond, the human woman and the wounded dragon. Two beings from different worlds, brought together by compassion and mutual respect. As Sarah helped support the dragon's weight, guiding it toward what she hoped would be a safer location deeper in the station, she realized that everything had changed. She was no longer just trying to survive. She was responsible for this magnificent creature's life as well. And somehow that responsibility didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a privilege. Sarah found a hidden maintenance room deep in the station's lower levels, far from the main corridors where the Krillian search parties might patrol. The space was cramped for the dragon's massive size, but it was secure and had its own power supply. More importantly, it had access to the station's water recycling system and emergency food stores. The dragon settled carefully onto the metal floor, its injured wing draped protectively around Sarah's makeshift sleeping area. Even wounded and exhausted, the creature seemed determined to shield her from any potential threat. "You need to rest," Sarah said softly, checking the bandages she had applied to its burns. "Your body needs energy to heal." The dragon's golden eyes followed her movements with keen intelligence. As she worked, it made those complex tonal sounds again, varying the pitch and rhythm in what was clearly a deliberate pattern. Sarah paused in her work, studying the creature's expression. "You're trying to talk to me, aren't you?" The dragon's eyes brightened, and it made an approving rumble deep in its throat. "I wish I could understand," Sarah continued, settling cross-legged beside the great head. "I've studied dozens of alien languages, but I've never heard anything like your speech patterns." Over the following days, as they hid together in the maintenance room, Sarah began to notice patterns in the dragon's vocalizations. Different tones seemed to correspond to different concepts. A low, warm rumble appeared to mean contentment or gratitude. A higher, sharper sound indicated alertness or concern. Complex melodic phrases seemed to be attempts at more sophisticated communication. The dragon was remarkably patient with her efforts to understand. When Sarah tried to mimic its sounds, the creature would respond encouragingly, even when her human vocal cords could only produce crude approximations of its elegant tones. On the third day, Sarah made a breakthrough. She had been explaining her actions as she changed the dragon's bandages, saying healing each time she applied medicine to its wounds. The dragon had listened intently, and suddenly it produced a sound that was clearly an attempt to mimic her word. "Healing," it said, the pronunciation imperfect but unmistakable. Sarah nearly dropped her medical supplies. "You can learn our language!" The dragon's eyes sparkled with what Sarah could only describe as delight. It repeated the word several times, each pronunciation slightly better than the last. From that moment, their communication evolved rapidly. The dragon proved to have an extraordinary aptitude for language learning. Within days, it had mastered basic human words and was attempting simple sentences. Its voice was deep and melodious, turning even common words into something musical. "Sarah," it said one evening, pronouncing her name with careful precision. It was the first time the dragon had used her name, and hearing it spoken in that remarkable voice brought tears to her eyes. "Yes, I'm Sarah," she confirmed. "Do you have a name?" The dragon paused, considering the question. Then it produced a sound unlike any it had made before. A complex harmony of tones that seemed to contain multiple melodies woven together. It was beautiful and impossible for human vocal cords to reproduce. "I can't say that," Sarah admitted apologetically. The dragon seemed to think for a moment, then said, "Veltarion, close, for your voice." "Veltarion," Sarah repeated, and the dragon nodded approvingly. "Is that really your name?" "Part of name, full name is—" Veltarion produced another impossibly complex musical phrase. "In your words, guardian of the silver winds who watches over the young. But Veltarion will do." Sarah stared at the dragon in amazement. "Guardian of the silver winds? You're some kind of protector?" Veltarion's expression grew sad. "Was protector. My people, the Dreknari. We guard sacred nesting grounds on Zarian 7, have done so for 1,000 years. Your people live here? On this planet? Deep in mountain caves far from surface, we avoid contact with other species, prefer peace, solitude." Veltarion shifted carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at its injured wing. "But Krillians found our territory, began hunting us for sport." Sarah felt a surge of anger and disgust. The Krillians weren't just attacking the human research station, they were committing genocide against an entire species. "How many of your people are left?" she asked gently. "Do not know. Was separated during attack. Came to surface seeking help, but found only more violence." Veltarion's golden eyes met hers. "Until I found you." The simple statement carried enormous weight. Sarah realized that she might be the only hope this magnificent being had left. Over the next week, as Veltarion's injuries slowly healed, Sarah learned more about Draknari culture. They were an ancient people who valued wisdom, art, and the protection of life above all else. Their society was built around the concept of guardianship. Each Draknari was assigned specific responsibilities for protecting something precious, whether it was a sacred site, a group of young, or even individual members of other species who had earned their respect. "We believe all life is connected," Veltarian explained during one of their long conversations. "When you heal one creature, you heal part of the universe. When you destroy without cause, you damage everything." Sarah found herself deeply moved by this philosophy. It aligned perfectly with her own beliefs about the sanctity of life and the importance of scientific understanding over conquest. "Is that why you're protecting me?" she asked. "Because I helped heal you?" Veltarion was quiet for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was softer than usual. "At first, yes. Draknari law requires that we guard those who show us kindness. But now—" The dragon paused, seeming to search for the right words. "Now it is more than duty. You risked your life for stranger. Stayed when others fled. This is rare quality, even among my people." Sarah felt warmth spread through her chest at the dragon's words. She had formed bonds with alien species before in her research, but nothing like this. With Veltarion, she felt a connection that transcended species barriers entirely. The dragon's recovery was remarkable to witness. Its natural healing abilities far exceeded anything Sarah had seen in other species. The burns that had covered its side faded to faint marks, and the torn wing membrane began to regenerate with incredible precision. "Your biology is amazing," Sarah commented as she removed the last of the bandages. "Human injuries this severe would have taken months to heal." "Draknari live long lives," Veltarion explained. "Must be able to recover from harm quickly. Guardianship is sometimes dangerous work." As Veltarion regained its strength, it began to share more about its culture and abilities. Sarah learned that the Draknari possessed senses far beyond human comprehension. They could detect emotional states through subtle changes in body chemistry, sense electromagnetic fields, and even perceive what Veltarion described as life energy, the fundamental force that connected all living beings. "You have strong life energy," Veltarion told her one day. "It is why healing comes naturally to you. You instinctively strengthen the life force in others." Sarah had always prided herself on her scientific rationality, but she found herself surprisingly open to these concepts. Perhaps there were aspects of existence that human science hadn't yet discovered. On the 8th day of their hiding, Veltarion's wing had healed enough for limited movement. The dragon demonstrated this by carefully extending both wings, revealing their full, magnificent span. In the confined space of the maintenance room, the wings nearly touched both walls. "Beautiful," Sarah breathed, staring at the intricate patterns of veins and membrane that caught the artificial light like stained glass. "They will carry us both when the time comes," Veltarion said with quiet confidence. "Both of us? You do not think I would leave you behind?" Sarah felt her heart skip. She had been trying not to think about what would happen when Veltarion was fully healed. The dragon would want to find its people, and she would need to find her own way off the planet. Their paths would diverge, and this extraordinary friendship would become just a memory. "I can't fly," she pointed out practically, "and I need to get back to human space. My people will be worried." Veltarion studied her with those penetrating golden eyes. "Your people are fortunate to have one who cares so deeply for other life, but you are not just returning to them. You are carrying knowledge now, about my people, about what Krillians are doing here. This knowledge could save many lives." Sarah realized the dragon was right. She was no longer just a xenobiologist who had survived an attack. She was a witness to attempted genocide and the discoverer of an entirely new intelligent species. Her responsibility extended far beyond her own survival. "Will you be able to find your people?" she asked. "I can sense them, if any survive. Draknari are connected through what you might call telepathic bonds. Very weak over distance, but present." Veltarian's expression grew determined. "First, I ensure your safety. Then I search for survivors." The next morning, Sarah was awakened by Veltarian's urgent voice. "Sarah, ships approaching, multiple vessels." She sat up quickly, immediately alert. "Krillians?" "No. Different energy signatures. These ships are familiar." Sarah accessed the maintenance room's limited sensor display and felt her heart leap with hope. 3 ships were descending toward the station, and their configuration was definitely human. "It's a rescue mission," she said excitedly. "They must have tracked the emergency beacons." But as she watched the sensor readings more closely, her excitement turned to worry. The ships were heavily armed military vessels, not rescue transports. Their approach pattern was aggressive, suggesting they expected serious resistance. "They're coming to fight the Krillians," Sarah realized. "This is going to be a battleground." Veltarian rose to its full height, wings slightly spread in a protective posture. "Then we must reach them before fighting begins. You will be safe with your people, and I can avoid being caught in crossfire." Sarah gathered her few possessions, her mind racing with possibilities and concerns. How would the human military react to Veltarian? Would they see the dragon as a threat, as a potential weapon, as a scientific curiosity to be studied? She looked at her magnificent companion, remembering the trust in those golden eyes when she had first approached the wounded creature. Veltarian had shown her kindness, intelligence, and loyalty beyond anything she had expected. Now it was her turn to protect the dragon. "Veltarian," she said seriously, "when we meet my people, some of them might be afraid of you. Some might want to capture you or study you. I won't let that happen, but you need to be prepared." The dragon considered this calmly. "Your species judges by appearance first, understanding later?" "Some of us do, yes. Then I will be careful. But Sarah..." Veltarian moved closer, lowering its great head until they were eye to eye. "I trust you. Whatever comes, I know you will do what is right." The simple faith in those words took Sarah's breath away. This incredible being was placing its life in her hands, just as she had placed her trust in its protection. Together, they made their way through the station's damaged corridors toward the surface levels, where the human ships would dock. As they moved, Sarah found herself making a silent promise to her companion. She would protect Veltarian just as the dragon had protected her. Their bond transcended species, and nothing would break it. The sound of weapons fire echoed through the station as they climbed. The battle for Zarian 7 was beginning, and Sarah and Veltarian were walking directly into the heart of it. The first human soldiers Sarah encountered were members of a special forces team sweeping the upper levels of the research station. They emerged from a side corridor with weapons raised, their combat armor gleaming under the emergency lighting. "Civilian identified," one of them barked into his comm unit. "Dr. Sarah Chen, station xenobiologist. Subject appears unharmed." Sarah stepped forward, relief flooding through her. "Thank goodness you're here. I've been hiding for over a week." The squad leader, a stern woman with lieutenant's bars, approached cautiously. "Dr. Chen, I'm Lieutenant Torres. We're here to secure the station and evacuate any survivors. Are you injured?" "No, I'm fine. But listen, we need to get you to the extraction point immediately," Torres interrupted. "Intelligence suggests there are still Krillian forces in the area, and we've detected some kind of large predator in the lower levels. It's not safe here." Sarah felt her stomach clench with anxiety. The large predator they had detected was obviously Veltarian. She had to explain before there was a tragic misunderstanding. "Lieutenant, that's what I need to tell you about. The creature you detected isn't a threat. It's... A low rumble echoed through the corridor, and Veltarion emerged from the shadows behind Sarah. Even injured and moving carefully, the dragon was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Its golden eyes reflected the soldiers' tactical lights, and its wings rustled softly as it positioned itself protectively near Sarah. The soldiers' reaction was instantaneous. Weapons swung toward the dragon, targeting systems activated, and Torres barked orders into her comm. "Contact! Large hostile creature requesting immediate backup!" "Wait!" Sarah stepped between the soldiers and Veltarion, her arms spread wide. "Don't shoot! It's not hostile!" "Dr. Chen, step away from that thing immediately," Torres commanded, her rifle trained on the dragon's head. Veltarion remained perfectly still, but Sarah could sense the tension in its massive frame. The dragon understood the danger, but was making no aggressive moves, trusting Sarah to handle the situation. "Its name is Veltarion," Sarah said firmly. "It's a member of an intelligent species native to this planet. The Krillians have been hunting its people. It saved my life." Torres looked at Sarah as if she had lost her mind. "Dr. Chen, you've been through a traumatic experience. That creature is obviously some kind of apex predator. Step away now and we'll handle this." "I will not step away," Sarah said, her voice carrying an authority that surprised even her. "This being is under my protection and I'm ordering you not to fire." "Doctor, you're not in command here." Torres's words were cut off by a new sound, the distinctive hum of Krillian energy weapons charging. From the corridor behind, the soldiers came the heavy footsteps of approaching enemies. "Krillians!" one of the soldiers shouted. "Multiple contacts! Closing fast!" The human squad immediately shifted their attention to the real threat, forming a defensive perimeter. Energy blasts began lighting up the corridor as the two forces engaged. In the chaos of the firefight, Sarah heard Torres shout into her comm, "This is Delta Squad. We're pinned down on level 7. The civilian is with some kind of alien creature. Situation is complicated." The response crackled back. "Understood, Delta. Omega Squad is en route to your position. Eliminate all non-human threats and secure the civilian." Sarah's blood ran cold. Non-human threats would include Veltarion. As if sensing her distress, the dragon moved closer to Sarah, its wing extending to shield her from the energy fire that was beginning to ricochet off the walls. "Sarah," Veltarion spoke quietly, its voice barely audible over the sounds of combat. "Your people will not listen. I should leave before more arrive." "No," Sarah said fiercely. "I won't let them hurt you. You stayed to protect me. Now it's my turn." The firefight intensified as more Krillian warriors joined the battle. The human soldiers were skilled and well-equipped, but they were outnumbered and caught in an unfavorable position. Lieutenant Torres fell back towards Sarah and Veltarion, blood streaming from a gash on her forehead. "Dr. Chen, we need to move. The corridor behind us leads to the emergency exit, but we can't hold this position much longer." As if summoned by her words, the distinct whine of incoming reinforcements filled the air. But instead of more human soldiers, it was additional Krillian forces arriving through the station's damaged hull. "We're surrounded," one of the soldiers reported grimly. That was when Veltarion acted. The dragon rose to its full height, wings spreading wide despite its recent injuries. The creature let out a sound unlike anything Sarah had heard before. Not the melodic tones of its normal speech, but a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. The effect on the Krillians was immediate and dramatic. Their weapons' fire faltered as they turned to face this new threat. Sarah heard sounds of confusion and what might have been fear in their harsh voices. Veltarion moved with fluid grace despite its size, placing itself between the humans and the approaching Krillian forces. Energy blasts struck its scales and simply deflected away, the dragon's natural armor proving remarkably effective against their weapons. "Impossible," Torres breathed. "It's shielding us." The dragon's tail lashed out with precise control, striking a Krillian warrior and sending the alien flying into a wall without killing it. Veltarion was clearly restraining its strength, using just enough force to neutralize threats without unnecessary violence. More Krillian forces poured into the corridor, but Veltarion held its ground. The dragon's wing movements created powerful gusts of air that disrupted the enemy's formations, while its roars seemed to have an almost paralyzing effect on the attacking warriors. "It's protecting us!" Sarah called to Torres over the noise. "Can't you see? Veltarion is saving our lives!" For the first time, Lieutenant Torres looked at the dragon with something other than hostility. She was a soldier, trained to recognize tactical advantages, and even she couldn't deny what was happening. The battle turned decisively in their favor when additional human reinforcements finally arrived. Omega Squad emerged from the rear corridor just as Veltarion's defensive action had pushed the Krillians back. "This is Omega Leader," came a new voice over the comm. "We have visual on the situation. Dr. Chen, are you safe?" "Yes, thanks to my friend here," Sarah replied, placing her hand on Veltarion's scaled flank. The newly arrived soldiers raised their weapons toward the dragon, but Torres held up a hand to stop them. "Hold fire," she ordered. "The creature is non-hostile. It just saved our lives." Omega Leader, a grizzled major with cybernetic implants, approached cautiously. Sarah could see him trying to process what he was seeing. A civilian woman standing calmly next to a massive dragon-like alien that had apparently just fought off an entire squad of Krillian warriors. "Dr. Chen," the major said carefully, "can you explain the situation?" Sarah took a deep breath and began to tell the story. How she had found Veltarion wounded, how she had treated its injuries, how they had communicated and formed a bond. She explained about the Draknari people and the genocide the Krillians were attempting. As she spoke, Veltarion remained quietly at her side, its golden eyes watching the human soldiers with calm intelligence. Occasionally, the dragon would make soft comments in English, demonstrating its ability to communicate. "Remarkable," the major said when Sarah finished her account. "Command is going to want to debrief you extensively. This could change everything we know about this sector." "What about Veltarion?" Sarah asked. "Its people might still be alive. They need help." The major studied the dragon thoughtfully. "That's above my pay grade, Doctor. But I can tell you that any species willing to protect human civilians from Krillian attack is going to be looked upon favorably by our government." Over the following hours, as the human forces secured the station and evacuated the remaining Krillian forces, Sarah watched with pride as Veltarion interacted with the soldiers. The dragon was patient with their questions, demonstrating its intelligence and peaceful nature. Several of the younger soldiers were clearly fascinated, asking about Draknari culture and abilities. Lieutenant Torres approached Sarah as they prepared to board the evacuation transport. "Doctor," she said quietly, "I owe you an apology. And I owe your friend my life. When Command asks for my report, I'm going to make sure they understand what really happened here." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "Veltarion's people have been guardians for thousands of years. They deserve our protection, not our fear." As they walked toward the transport, Sarah felt Veltarion's gentle touch on her shoulder. "Sarah," the dragon said softly, "you did protect me, kept your promise even when it was dangerous." "You protected me first," Sarah reminded her companion. "You've been guarding me with your life since the moment we met." "This is what guardianship means," Veltarion explained. "Not just duty, but choice. I choose to protect you because you are worthy of protection, and you choose to protect me for same reason." As they boarded the transport, Sarah realized that their bond had evolved beyond the simple relationship of healer and patient. They had become something new, a partnership between species, built on mutual respect and genuine caring. The transport lifted off from the damaged station, carrying them toward the human fleet waiting in orbit. Sarah looked out the viewports at the planet below, thinking about the other Draknari who might still be hiding in the deep caves. "We'll find your people," she promised Veltarian, "and we'll make sure they're safe." The dragon's golden eyes reflected the stars outside as it replied, "With you as ally, I believe they will be. You have already shown that humans can be true guardians when they choose to be." 6 months later, Sarah stood in the lush gardens of New Geneva Station, watching Veltarian demonstrate flight techniques to a group of fascinated xenobiology students. The dragon had become something of a sensation in academic circles, the first confirmed case of a fully sapient reptilian species with advanced cultural development. More importantly, the joint human Draknari expedition to Xerion 7 had been a complete success. They had found nearly 200 surviving Draknari living in the deep cave systems, and the human government had officially recognized their territorial rights. The Krillians had been expelled from the system, and a permanent protection treaty was in place. Veltarian had been offered a position as cultural liaison between the two species, which it had accepted with its characteristic grace and wisdom. But Sarah knew that the dragon's primary motivation wasn't diplomacy or cultural exchange. "You stayed because of me, didn't you?" she had asked during one of their many conversations. "I stayed because this is where I am needed," Veltarian had replied. "My people are safe now, but there are other guardianships that require attention. Other species who might benefit from protection." Sarah had smiled at that answer. It was so perfectly like Veltarian, turning a personal loyalty into a universal mission. As she watched her friend glide gracefully through the station's artificial atmosphere, Sarah reflected on how much her life had changed. She was no longer just a xenobiologist studying alien life forms. She was a bridge between worlds, a protector of the vulnerable, and the trusted companion of one of the most remarkable beings in the galaxy. Veltarian landed gracefully near her, folding its wings with practiced ease. "The students learn quickly," it observed. "They ask good questions about flight dynamics." "They're lucky to have you as a teacher," Sarah said. "We all are." The dragon turned those unforgettable golden eyes toward her, and Sarah saw in them the same warmth and intelligence that had first captured her heart in that damaged corridor so many months ago. "I am the fortunate one," Veltarian said quietly, "to have found a guardian who would risk everything for a wounded stranger. To have learned that protection and friendship can exist between any beings who choose to offer them." Sarah reached out to touch her friend's scaled snout, marveling once again at the warm strength beneath her fingers. She had helped heal a wounded dragon, and in return, it had guarded her with its life. But more than that, they had discovered something that transcended species and worlds, the profound connection that comes from choosing to care for another being, no matter how different they might seem. As the artificial sunset painted the station's sky in brilliant colors, Sarah and Veltarian stood together in comfortable silence, two guardians watching over their shared future. The wounded dragon had long since healed, but its protection of the human woman who had saved it would last forever.